Hello and welcome to Get Rich Slow, the podcast that challenges a conventional get rich quick ideology and instead explores what authentic success really means and how you can achieve it. I'm Hannah Martin, I'm the founder of Talent Ladies Club, and I am joined today by Sally Baker, senior therapist, published writer and media commentator, for an episode on authentic confidence. So hi Sally.
Hi, thanks for having me, Hannah.
Thank you for joining me. Again, this is our second recording or second podcast together. I know I've asked you this before, but for anyone who hasn't listened to your other episode, what does success mean to you personally?
I think I've honed it down since we last spoke as well. I think success means for me choice, and in the very aptly choice as well, because here we are confronted with Wade versus Roe and all of that that's happening currently in the world. So for me, it's about having choice. And when I think back when I was a single parent, when my son was 5 and I got divorced, I didn't have very many avenues of choice. So it feels very privileged now to be able to say yes to things like this, which I love doing, and no to things that I don't want to do. And I think for women to say no, and that's one of the things I teach my clients, every time a woman says no to something, I think an angel gets its wings. You know, it's a good thing.
Excellent, thank you.
We're not
Good
encouraged
answer.
as women. We're not encouraged to say no. Yeah.
No, we're definitely not. So thank you. So I want to talk today about confidence. And firstly, why is it so important that we are confident?
Confidence isn't a fixed barometer of where we're at, because confidence is like a spiky profile. We can be very confident in some situations and feel very unconfident in other situations. So, and it's influenced by so many different aspects. So confidence is a funny thing. It's not something that I aim for necessarily. I think it's about, when you're doing something like a podcast or a speech or a TED Talk, confidence is about lots of preparation and being very present. So if confidence meant that you could just glide off and do something without thinking about it, that wouldn't be my goal. Confidence is maybe the mindset to just, do the prep you need to do and do your very best, and it's okay.
Do you think there's a difference between having confidence and being confident? So I totally get that. There are times when I feel very confident in situations where I'm familiar to me with people I know. Put me in a room full of people I don't know, and I'm naturally shy and I'm not confident. But is there a baseline that we have within ourselves where there are like some people who are more confident more of the time or feel more confident, and they may have more or less confidence in certain situations, but their baseline of confidence is higher? Or is that something else? Is that not confidence?
I think the whole thing about people faking it till they make it and having an ability, when you scratch the surface of anyone, and I've worked with quite a few famous people, and they will tell you that they're actually very shy, very introverted, very unconfident, but they have this way of projecting, or maybe they just have this way of just doing stuff. Again, back to prep and doing the best they can and just going for it. And that might be the difference, because it feels like it's a mindset. The same people who are very successful versus the same people who don't feel successful probably feel the same level of confidence versus unconfidence.
Is it maybe we're talking about self-esteem? Is that different to confidence? So for example, you could be in a situation. Yeah, so you could be in a situation and not feel confident. But it doesn't, and so that can be a bad experience. Maybe you lack confidence, and so you feel awkward then. But it doesn't change how you feel about yourself versus someone who might be in a situation lack confidence, but it might knock them more. Is that true?
It's true, and confidence is definitely driven by levels of self-esteem, and self-esteem comes back to childhood and feeling judged, and how we think, that style of thinking, and our negative thoughts about ourselves. So when I'm working with self-esteem with a client, I often do this thing with the marbles. So here I have a glass fish tank that has a whole bunch of gold and blue marbles in it, and I ask my client, well, self-esteem is based on the thoughts you have about yourself over the last 14 days. It's a kind of rolling 14 days. So if someone meets you in the street and asks you, so how are you feeling about yourself? You don't go back all the way to childhood and think about that time when you stood up in class and everyone laughed. You just go back the last 14 days. So I say to them, imagine 14 days ago, I sent you a glass fish tank that represents your brain. And every time you had a life-affirming thought about yourself, every time you were kind and generous to yourself, you dropped in a gold marble. And every time you had a disparaging, negative, judgmental thought about yourself, you dropped in a blue marble. And because this is therapy and not mathematics, I say, well, now you've brought it along to the session and there are 100 marbles in there. So what's the percentage of gold versus blue? And honestly, I've worked with some hugely world successful people, and they'll say their blue marbles are 98 and there might be 2 gold. So it doesn't, versus people who seemingly have a smaller life, and they're saying, oh, but in fact, I don't really see the people who have loads of gold marbles in their fish tank, because they're out in the world having a great time, living their life, living it large, whatever they're doing. So I'm not actually seeing them. So I'm seeing the people who have a very critical voice inside their head. And this is the first stage of acknowledging that voice for us to do the work to dispel that voice.
And you talked about the roots of it. Sort of one thing it could be, like, for example, standing up in class and having a bad experience then. Are there other things that are commonly significant about people's self-esteem? For example, how your mother speaks to you, or her mother speaks to herself about herself. Are there things we pick up in life that are common as significant triggers for that?
There are definitely significant triggers for that, because the thing about the voice inside your head, and everyone has one, and when I say that to clients, they all raise an eyebrow and think, I don't have a voice in my head, but really that's the voice in your head. So so the first thing is to acknowledge the voice, and it acts like a toxic drip drip just below conscious awareness. So bringing it into conscious awareness, firstly with the marbles, gold versus blue, and then say, okay, so whose voice is that? Does it speak to you? Do you recognize the voice? Does it speak to you in an accent or an idiom? Does it use words that are archaic, that come from your past? Whose voice is that? And it's often a parent's voice. It can be a grandparent's or a parent or a teacher, someone who's had lots of power over you when you felt really powerless. And the exploration of that voice is another step to distance yourself from the voice, because the recognition that actually it's not even your voice in your head that's putting you down. It's someone else's voice that you're still listening to, even though you've outgrown all of that necessity. So it's often a parent. Lots of things happen at school that can seem very small to parents, and parents don't pick up on it. I had a client who was in his 50s. He remembered everyone in the school being tested, having their eyes tested in the hall. And he remembers being told, oh, you've got to go and stand over there because there's something wrong with your eyes. And he felt really picked on and really deflated. And he carried that with him. So a lot of those medicals that happened when we were kids, if you're in your 50s and 60s, happened in those big public spaces with no dignity and very little care for how children felt. So lots of small cruelties happen all of the time, but people who are sensitive remember them and internalize them. And it doesn't help if you've got a mother or a father who judges you, or whose love for you feels conditional. I'll love you if you're kind, or if you're sweet, or if you're nice, or if you're quiet. Lots of people are taught that they are only lovable if they are helping other people or being compliant. So having to unlearn and release and resolve those restrictions that make people judge themselves is really important to the work.
So I before we spoke about this, and you said that you have a kind of an issue with the idea of confidence in the way I was presenting it here. So what we're saying is there's 2 things. So one is how you feel and act in a specific situation. Yeah. And then we've got general self-esteem. And so for how you feel in a situation seems to be, from what you're saying, it's about preparation. There are some situations you're going to lack confidence because it's a new thing to you. It's normal to feel a lack of confidence. And you actually shouldn't feel overconfident then, because you're learning.
That's right.
But the key thing, I think, then is it's more about self-esteem, isn't it? It's more about because if you have a low self-esteem, you might have a great experience in one day, like something you're really familiar with, but it's not really going to affect this your level of self-esteem, and that's what you really need to work on.
That's what you really need to work on. That's there's a bit of psychology involved with this, and how this starts. So it's called, if you have a healthy self-esteem as an adult, it probably originated in childhood, where if you were raised in a household where you were loved, honoured and adored and heard. And that's called an internal locus of control. And locus is Latin for the word place. So it means if you are raised in a really healthy, wholesome family, you have a place in you yourself where you feel powerful. So that things that you do as you go into adulthood and go through your life, you can have an impact on your world. That things that you do have traction. And that's counter to if you were raised in a household where you didn't feel loved, honoured or adored, or if the love that you received from your parents or carers felt conditional on your behaviour. So those people have an external locus of control. And that means that they don't feel powerful inside themselves. They feel as if the external world has all the power, and they get very buffeted and can get knocked off their feet by the external powers, and it doesn't feel as though they have much traction in their life. Luckily for everyone, you can learn this. You can switch your external locus of control to an internal one later in life. It's something we can get later if we weren't lucky enough to have it as we grew up.
So so if someone's listening to this and they're thinking, get that, I have an external locus of control.
Yeah.
Obviously, therapy might help them, but is that the thing that they need to do? Or what are some things they can do right now or kind of start to change that?
Okay. I think they should think about their marbles, whether they've got gold marbles going in on a daily basis or blue marbles. And I think they should then start noting down the kind of things that their internal voice says to them. Because this internal voice, it's about bringing it into conscious awareness so that you can start to interrupt it. So when you find yourself faced with a challenge and you're feeling unconfident, you might start to hear your inner voice say things to you like, oh, you're always rubbish, you'll never amount to anything, those kind of things. And you need to interrupt it because it's had huge amounts of power over you for a long time. And you can interrupt it in various different ways. There are 2 or 3 ways of doing it. One of the easiest ways to do it is if you're on your own and you're not in company, you can remember there's a game show with Family Fortunes or something, and when you got a wrong answer, you just go, you need to, your thoughts that are being generated by this internal voice that you have in your head that isn't helping you. So you need to interrupt it. And if you're on your own, you can say it out loud, like, just say it and stop it. And another way to interrupt negative thoughts that can really, really spiral you into inactivity and fear is to do a thing called cross crawl. Cross crawl. Now, cross crawl is a meridian energy therapy where you break state. Because what you're doing is you're becoming an overthinker around a negative thought that's going round and round in your head. And you need to break state with that. And you do something physical to break state. You can go out to your back garden, breathe in, just breathe in some fresh air, just get outside, get up from where you're sitting and move. Or you can run up a flight of stairs if you're able to, or run back down. You have to break state. And it's easier to do that physically, or you can do the game show noise if you want to do that. So, don't ruminate. Don't allow this old negative voice that isn't even your voice in your head determine how you feel about yourself. Yeah,
that's great. They're really good tips. What I always say to people is, and people often don't realise this, that our thoughts and feelings are simple habits. And just like you can give up smoking or you can stop biting your nails, you can change them. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to happen straight away. It takes repetitive action over time, and it's going to feel more comfortable to have the unhelpful, maybe negative thought or feeling. And it's going to be more comfortable to have that because it's familiar to you. But over time, if you persevere, having a new thought or feeling, and those are great tips to sort of identify, stop, and then actively choose. And people don't realise this. They have the opportunity to choose how they think and feel. They just need to believe they can and do things like that.
Exactly that, because thoughts are just thoughts, and we give them so much power, but really they can be quite fleeting. Because lots of us, certainly none of us were ever raised to question our thought processes and what kind of thinking style we have. But there are some very unhelpful thinking styles out there. You know, catastrophic thinkers, ruminators. So ruminators always think about the past and get completely wrapped up in the past, whereas catastrophic thinkers often think about the future. So when people think about the future, they very rarely ever see sunny uplands and everything's amazing. It's very easy to go towards the catastrophic. And you have to think of it like a seed in your hand. So if you have a seed in the palm of your hand, the more you give it water and sunshine, pay attention to it, the seed grows. But if you're thinking a negative thought, a really limiting self-belief thought, and you're giving it more and more attention, it begins to sprout and it grows and grows and grows. So it's a massive vine. And in the end, it's floor to ceiling and wall to wall, and you are completely overwhelmed. And that's very debilitating. So that needs to be interrupted. It's a bit like when you see yourself dipping into depression or anxiety, what can you do with your mental health? What can you do to support yourself, not going down that slippery, slidey slope? Because when you go down, it's really, really hard to pull yourself back up. So it's about recognizing how you're feeling and what you can do to improve that. And the thing that we talked about when people are about to do something that is difficult for them, like public speaking, for instance, is quite an anxiety-provoking thing for people. The emotions around anxiety are very similar to the emotions around excitement. You know, that rapid heartbeat, your eyes feel clearer, you're very alert. You can also be excited. And we take the excited feelings and we think, oh gosh, I'm really anxious. It's natural to have a level of anxiety. It's only a problem and only needs therapeutic intervention if the anxiety is big enough that it's actually going to stop you, that it's curtailing your life experience. But if you can push through those smaller bits of anxiety and remind yourself, actually, I'm also excited, then it might help you just go forward and do the things that you want to do.
You mentioned earlier something called imposter syndrome. And I want to talk about that for a minute. So what some people do is this fake it till you make it idea. So say, for example, I need to give a speech and I'm really nervous about it. So I'm going to pretend that I'm really confident at it. Now, is that a good thing? And when is it, or is it not a good thing? And is there a variation that if it's good? Does imposter syndrome work? Sorry, there's two things there, fake it till you make it. And then imposter syndrome is obviously thinking, I'm doing well, but actually I'm not. So to separate that, that's something I realise is quite confusing. So there's two things. So let's park imposter syndrome for now and talk about fake it till you make it. So does that work? Does that sort of, I'm not feeling confident, so I'm going to sort of pretend I am and just go for it. Does that work or not?
I don't think it works. I don't think it works because if you were really, really going to fake it till you make it, it's almost like, what's the school of acting where you absolutely live it?
Yes, method acting.
Method acting. So you'd have to method act, which means you'd have to completely immerse yourself in the experience of this is what a successful person would look like doing a presentation at work, for instance. Whereas equally, it's okay to acknowledge to yourself that actually this evokes some anxiety in me, but I'm going to do lots of preparation, I'm going to do lots of rehearsals, and I'm going to give it my best try. And I think that's a more authentic way of recognizing that this is a challenge for me, and the best way for me to overcome this is to not do it by the seat of my pants, but to do it really methodically with lots of prep. Now, I'm a great believer in doing lots of prep, really. And then you can fly. Then it gives you the headroom to really enjoy the experience.
And I think that's what I was trying to get to with the imposter syndrome. I realised that because if you are faking it till you make it, and by fluke, you know, like it does, then it's never really going to feel like you've really done it. Because part of you is like, am I still faking it? Whereas if you've done the prep, then are you more likely to feel like, I deserve this, I've worked for it. Exactly.
And you will embody that. You will embody, I have done the preparation. I know my topic. This is my passion. If it is something that you're passionate about, more the better. Than I'm faking this. I don't. You're never going to feel authentic. And imposter syndrome strikes everybody. Mm-hmm. There is no one at any level of accomplishment that that doesn't have those thoughts. Oh my goodness, is this the day I'm going to get caught out? Is this the day I'm not going to be able to deliver? Everyone has those feelings, and it's sort of humbling, because the opposite of that is hubris, where you feel that you're bigger than the gods, and that's fairly unappealing. So a little humility is a good thing. Is a good thing, because it makes us try a little harder.
And what about people? I totally agree. A little bit of imposter syndrome sometimes it is a good thing, but it keeps us sharp. It keeps us on our toes.
Sure.
But what about people who have done the prep, that are really good at what they do? And again, this might come down to their levels of self-esteem, but still feel like that they're not really deserving of it, or that they've somehow lucked their way through and they haven't. How can those people get over that feeling and feel more confident and better about themselves and what they're doing?
I think it will be a trigger from the past, something that's making them feel bad today, triggered by something that is half buried. And memories buried alive never die. So there's something unresolved from their past. That's where, if you can't do your own root canal work, that's where you might need a therapeutic intervention to find. It doesn't need to be the initiatizing event. You don't need to find the first time you felt like this, because that often hang ties people, and they say, I can't find it, I can't remember it. But it'll be a theme. It'll be a pattern that you may have been running for a while. So there's a thing that NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Programming, which is a timeline protocol, which is quite interesting. You can do it with a million different things. I've done it with alcohol use. I've done it with women whose weight has been completely managed, and they've felt in control of their weight and what they've been eating, versus times when they felt their emotional eating has been completely out of control. And this timeline starts at birth and ends in the current day. And when I say it starts with birth, no one remembers their birth, but everyone will have heard apocryphal stories about their birth. You know, what kind of baby were you? Were you a sickly baby, a needy baby, a quiet baby, a content baby? And, we go back to picking up family legends about what kind of childhood. And then the timeline goes from birth at key events, like what was you like when how did you feel about yourself when you started primary school? Did you go to nursery before that? What was secondary school like? What was puberty like? Just kind of milestones. How did you feel about yourself when you got married? What was happening then when you had your children? What was the first divorce like? All of those things. So we look at the positive events in someone's life and the more challenging events, and we plot that back to how they were feeling, what judgments they were making about themselves. One of the things I say in therapy all of the time is no amount of therapy will stop shit happening. But it's the judgments you make about yourself, about those negative, challenging events, that are often more enduring and more damaging than the event themselves. So, when you got divorced, or when you moved house, or when this happened to you, what did you tell yourself? What stories did you tell yourself? Because they are the ones that we probably need to be released and resolved and let go of.
And I guess that kind of sounds like it comes back to that self-esteem issue again. It's like, say, the stories that we have told ourselves since we were young, and probably didn't even realise were being told to us about ourselves, that we've internalised, and that's how it shows up. So even when we do something good, we can't believe it because you're the girl that always messes up, or,
That's it.
You're the guy that never gets things finished. And so if you do get things finished, well, I can't have done, and I can't really enjoy it because that's not me.
Yes, I worked with a professional gambler from Mississippi, and it was his job. It was very strange that you'd be a professional gambler, and he said, I win and win and win, and I reach a ceiling. And whenever I reach that ceiling of winnings, I then will go, this is at a casino, then I will lose all that day's take. What happens to me in that moment of hitting that ceiling? And we tracked it back to his initiatizing event was when he was 8 and his parents were divorced, and his father would come irregularly to see him. And his dad would say, oh, let's play catch in the garden. And they play catch for a while with a, baseball glove and a ball. And if this man, when he was a child, dropped the ball, his dad would lose patience with him immediately and say, always knew nothing, never amount to anything. You're always going to be a drop kick. And he'd walk off, throw the glove down, and that would be the end of the visit. So he had it in his head that he could only go a certain way before he dropped the ball. And we cleared that memory and cleared those emotions that were attached to that memory, and he was able to to go and make better judgments and to not have to throw away his winnings. It's
That's
very
excellent.
strange.
Yeah, have you read The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks?
No, I haven't.
Oh, you should definitely read it, because this is exactly what he talks about. He talks about having an upper limit that is set like that. And as soon as we go over it, we self-sabotage. And it could be feelings or success or anything. We self-sabotage to bring ourselves back in our comfort zone.
Yes, it happens all the time with peak performance work. So you'll see someone who's a great sportsman who in the build-up to his sporting event or her sporting event will be doing really well. But on the day of the competition, we'll fluke it. We'll just blow it. It is about... Again, you know, there'll be a negative voice in your head somewhere that is part of that limiting belief.
Can you talk about shyness and how that's connected? Because there's this idea that if someone is shy and isn't on the stage, kind of jazz hands, and that they're not confident, and I don't think they are. I think you could be shy. I'm very shy as a person, but I'm also very confident as a person. Like my self-esteem, you know, I had that childhood where I was raised in a really emotionally healthy family. So my self-esteem is really secure, my eternal locus of control. And so I get sort of frustrated sometimes when people talk about shy people and believing they lack confidence. Is that right? Are they connected, or how does that work?
I don't think shyness and lack of confidence is connected. Again, shyness is a bit of a spiky profile, where you can be shy in some situations and completely confident in other situations, or shy with new people and confident with your family. So again, it's a movable feast, but it's not to do with ability, and it's not to do with self-belief, really, because you can be shy. And I think about there's a march in London coming up, and maybe there'll be lots of demonstrations over this abortion and choice. And I'm thinking, right, we all have to choose our hills to die on. So even if one's shy, if you're passionate and you're interested and committed, you're going to do what's necessary to stand up, to step up.
And what advice would you give? Because I know in my own journey, I used to be so shy as a teenager that I would never press a stop button on a bus, because people would look at me if I stood up to press the button on a bus. So I would get off at the nearest stop to mine. But I know from my life, by putting myself in uncomfortable situations, has broadened those very narrow parameters I had when I was younger. So what advice would you have if someone is listening and they are shy and they find that is hindering them, and they want to be different but they don't know how to? Are there things that they can do to you're always going to have a shy personality or shy character, but what things can they do to affect that? And I think especially also as a parent of a shy child, because obviously she's inherited my sort of personality, and I know friends who've got shy children worry about that. So what advice do you have about overcoming shyness?
Moving out of comfort zone. I mean, shyness is about staying within your comfort zone. So extending gradually and incrementally the area that you are comfortable operating in. So, you know, doing new things, doing things that feel slightly challenging, and doing them regularly, and also acknowledging your wins and acknowledging your achievements. So shy people or people who are feel less confident often are really, really bad at acknowledging what they've achieved. And they don't, confident people take their wins to the core of them, and they're there as a resource to draw on whenever they need them. Whereas other people who feel less sure of themselves let their achievements sort of go over their head, a bit like they're made of Teflon and nothing sticks. So if it's a bit like when you do a to-do list. It's not enough to do a to-do list. It's about ticking off the to-do list when you've done it, when you've crossed off those things and managed to do them. So it wouldn't be a bad exercise to remind yourself of all that you have achieved in your life. We all began as helpless babies, and we only had two fears when we were born: the fear of loud noises, when someone claps, a baby will startle, and a fear if you have a newborn baby and you are lying on its back and you go to pretend as if to drop it, then the baby's arms come up because they're fear of being dropped. That's the only two fears that we have. Everything else is manufactured. Everything else is a construct from how we were raised. So if we can just remember, gosh, I did all of this learning. I can now ride a bike. I can do this. I remember, all the way through our lives, we've been learning and taking on new skills. And it's good to remind ourselves. It's a bit like gratitude work, to remind ourselves of all of the good things that we've been able to achieve. So that it's things, so that our achievements are less Teflon, or we're less Teflon to our achievements, and we allow them to stick at the core of us. We remember them.
I love that as an idea, like taking our achievements and taking them as resources we can use. And I think actually, probably people with a more healthy self-esteem will take the achievements, and they're better able to kind of go, that was a mistake, it happened. Everyone makes mistakes, I learn. And people with lower self-esteem maybe do the opposite. That was a fluke, but actually I'm going to hold dear all my failures. Yeah. And so maybe that's the thing to sort of to think about, switching up and saying, if I'm going to hold a resource close, it should be the good things.
Absolutely. And it's all about a mindset. It's a way of thinking about what you do. So for instance, in a car park, they're very tight. Supermarket car parks are very tight, and there's lots of manoeuvring to get in and out with the car and stuff. And if you clip another car's bumper, and some people go, oh God, I'm so stupid, and they're racking themselves, and those are the people who've got the lower self-esteem end of it, and I'll never be a good driver, I lost concentration. They'll just be putting themselves down in a million ways, plus all loads of bad language. Whereas someone who's got a healthier self-esteem would think, gosh, it's really good that I was absolutely spot on with my instincts and with my ability to react, because that could have been so much worse. So one event, that's what I mean about it's one single event. What story do you tell yourself from that one single event? Or maybe there's a range of events, or maybe one event sparked off lots of events that you're holding really negative judgments about yourself, and there's no compassion. So we can sit on a bus next to somebody, especially out of London, further up north. I just come back from Nottingham, so people talk to each other all of the time in Nottingham. So you can be sitting on the bus and you can be offering compassion and a good ear to someone, a complete stranger. What are you giving to yourself? How compassionate are you to yourself? How judgmental are you to yourself? How stringent and how negative are those judgments you make? Because you wouldn't treat a friend like that, and you probably wouldn't treat a stranger like that. But the things we say to ourselves can be horrendous and damaging because we hear ourselves.
Can it be a helpful exercise for people to actually write those down so they can see it sort of written down in black and white? If those thoughts come into their head, write down what they're thinking about themselves.
So back to the gold and the blue marbles, once you've done the voice and find out whose voice that is, start to put in your phone for a week, for just a few days, the key phrases that you say to yourself. They'll be shocking. And then we need to clear them. And if you can clear them yourselves by just kind of recognizing, I think clearing them by yourselves is a front brain exercise. I'm not completely convinced that we can interrupt our thought processes by just intellectually analysing them. We end up with more knowledge, but whether we can shift the really sore, raw emotions attached to that knowledge all on our own is probably too big an ask. But it's really interesting to be the psychologist, the detective of your own psychology, to understand what is driving you, what is also tripping you up, what is also the stumbling blocks for you to just enjoy all of the challenges, all of the opportunities that you have. And it won't be today's stuff. It won't. It will be old stuff. It'll be stuff from when you were powerless and other people had control over you.
That's excellent. Like you said, I could talk to you all day about this, but I am aware that time is passing. So as a final thing, we've covered a lot and you've shared lots of advice in here, but if someone is listening to this and they're thinking, I would love to feel more confident in certain situations, do you have any tips for those people? Your top confidence tips?
Top confidence tips.
Or self-esteem tips?
I'd track it back. That thing about being the detective of your own psychology, take time out to sit. Lots of people aren't very, there's a lot of talk about toxic positivity and feeling positive as you can. We've touched on that before, but I'm much more a fan of leaning in like actually leaning in and finding out what is going on here. Like, why am I finding this so difficult? What does this remind me of? Does it feel familiar? When have I felt like this before? And if you go, oh gosh, that really reminds me of this event in my life. Is that the main one? Can you track it back even further? You know, often people say, oh yeah, that reminds me of something that happened to me in my 20s, and they might want to stay there, stop there. But that'll also reflect something from much earlier, from pre-puberty probably. So just see what's going on, and then try and put some space, some emotional space between how you're feeling and that event, because it's influencing your ability to succeed and enjoy yourselves today, which isn't fair. Yeah.
Thank you. So basically, it sounds like if you're listening to this and you don't like how you feel or respond in situations, there are choices that you can. There are things you can do. And I am always a huge advocate for therapy. And I think finding the right counsellor, if there is something in your life that doesn't work for you, and you find the right person to help you work it out, because I think that, you know, can help shortcut some of the work you might do on your own. But yeah, no one needs to have feelings they don't like or have things that are stopping them living the life they want. They do have choices. They
do have choices. We only have to look at the pandemic, because lots of people went through the pandemic feeling really confident. You know, they didn't have FOMO, they had JOMO, and joy of missing out, and they were really calm. But other people felt incredibly distressed. And I've worked with some of those people that felt very distressed during the pandemic, and they were triggered by feelings of overwhelm that happened decades before. So we carry this stuff. Memories buried alive never die.
We do. And on that note, so if someone is listening to this and they want to find you online, obviously not in person, where could they find you?
So my website is workingonthebody.com, and they can find me there.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. I love talking to you. I always find it so interesting, and I hope people listening find it helpful as well. Thank you, Sally.
Thanks for having me, Hannah. Thank you.